we saw recently Amazon Web Services released App Studio, where they are saying that they will allow technical non-developers to support enterprise apps from a single prompt, basically. And it's an interesting announcement because they are going to make apps easier. Everybody has been talking about how they're creating low code, no code, citizen developers, and app development for the masses. And anytime Amazon steps into a market, it's a big deal. So I'm curious, given, of course, your transformation and IT background, Charlie, what do you see here?
So too early to tell, but interesting, provocative, if nothing else. I've been a big follower and fan of the low code, no code movement for a long time. I wrote an article for CIO 4 years ago about the end of programming or the end of development in the enterprise. Um, I think that for most enterprises, for most of the work that they do, developing in-house applications is a silly endeavor. So, right. In general, I think this is the natural evolution of that process. That said, I'm also somewhat skeptical that this is really just AWS almost doing anything they can. And I'm a pretty big fan of AWS, right? I think they for the most part are very level-headed. I view them as sort of like the Apple of the cloud world. They don't necessarily aren't necessarily first, but they tend to be very consistent and well thought out in how they execute. But I'm not convinced that this particular one isn't just an attempt to reset the impression because they're viewed as a laggard in most of the AI stuff.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure because I mean I look at it and I'm very skeptical about the ability to truly do this, but more importantly that I'd really want to in this sort of abstract environment. AWS is unsurprisingly the whole idea is you're building this, it's of course deploying the entire thing on their infrastructure, and so you're sort of locked in, and there's all those kind of pieces to it. Again too early to tell. All they have are some previews or some videos out there. You can go and sign up and kind of play with it a little bit. And the most interesting thing for me was that rather than just sort of jump from here's a prompt, and the idea is you literally type in like verbally or in written word, this is the application I want, and it goes off. Well, rather than just jumping straight to building something, it actually builds a requirement stock, which I thought was very waterfall of it. Um, and I thought it was interesting to see that sort of an approach. I mean, I think it has a ton of potential, but the end result of their apps, and I know you have some opinions on what's an enterprise app, but the end result of the app looked, fairly simplistic and fairly not something I'm even rushing out to production, and certainly not something that I would really consider quote unquote an enterprise app. So, I think it's provocative. I think it's interesting. I think it's certainly a harbinger of things to come, but I'm not sure that at the moment I'm like going, oh my gosh, this is changing everything.
Right. And I have a similar feel to this in that at first glance, I'm really not sure where this gets me compared to something like an Airtable or any number of no code and low code studio platformy things that are out there. When I look at the Amazon App Studio, sure, you can connect to a bunch of AWS services from a platform perspective, but honestly, the maturity of the apps you can create through App Studio still seems pretty simplistic to me. Their definition of an enterprise app is around having multiple UI pages, able to pull from multiple data sources, performing joins, filters, and other queries, and then having some sort of business logic. So maybe some sort of workflow kickoff capability. And to me, that's a starting point, but that technical definition seems a little weak, honestly, when you think about an enterprise grade app. And when I think about queries and basic workflows, I can kick that off from any number of data sources. And with the types of data integration and data management tools that we have out there, it's honestly not all that difficult to create some basic functionality around an application. So are these applications going to be mature enough to actually use in the wild in production? Or are we just talking about another way of creating a proof of concept that honestly is slightly faster than current no code platforms, but not really?
Yeah, not and the proof is in the pudding because unless I can take that and literally deploy it into production, which as we both said is probably unlikely, then it's sort of on like a code generation tool. If I have to go back and start like looking at what the heck it built and testing everything out, then I oftentimes will not end up getting any faster than if I just built it using a drag and drop type editor. And I think the biggest issue here is where I think, you know, where I think this is most useful is likely in the citizen development range,
Mhm.
right? Where it is someone who has this is what I'm trying to accomplish, but I don't understand the technicalities behind it, which is really the what we used to traditionally call no code, and that would be where this makes sense. But because they're AWS and they cater to a much more technical audience, they're trying to, of course, access and activate all of their backend services. That's not really what they're positioning for, and so there's just sort of this mismatch, I think, of where it lines up. And as we both know, when it comes to a true enterprise app, it's all in the complexity. The proof is in the pudding, and dealing with
Mhm.
security and authentication and access controls and complex business logic and all of this kind of stuff, which frankly would be exhausting to write out in a prompt in this verbose sort of form anyway, right? I mean, there's a reason these enterprise software development efforts are these big long processes with these big long retirement requirement stocks, and why we went to more agile approaches to it because it's this onerous process. And so I just there's so much of this that just it gets spearhead. Hey, look, we're talking about it, right? So that's part of the objective when you do an announcement like this is to get people talking about it. But right now, it's this is rising more of a parlor trick than anything, I think.
Right, because even with Amazon, so I will accede to the fact that AWS has security. Obviously, they have governance. They have all these capabilities across their data sources and across everything they do in their platform. But you still have to pick and choose what is correct for your enterprise. And there is no shortcut for that. And that is not a minutes process or even an hours process, because anytime you have to go through security, GRC, governance, finance, all of that stuff from a compliance perspective, that is going to be a multi-day process anyways, no matter how you
And it
create
requires deep levels of expertise and understanding and the
it.
nuances of all of which is why enterprise apps are so hard to build and develop. But